Hey guys, this is Jan for chess24.com. We're gonna take a look at the second game of the World Cup final played between Sergei Karjakin and Peter Svidler. Sergei Karjakin lost the first game with the white pieces, therefore he has to make use of his chances today where he has the white pieces against Peter Svidler. Of course, these guys know each other very well, have played a lot of games, and most of the games where Karjakin had wide focus on the Ruy Lopez, and today is no exception. Svidler goes for his favorite defense against Karjakin's favorite move, 1e4, and we go down a theoretical main line for quite a while. Castles, bishop to e7, rook to e1, b5, bishop b3, short castles, the standard position of the Ruy Lopez. And here the first minor surprise, at least to me, it's the main move, the move c3, but in their previous encounters Karjakin had preferred the line with a4 here, b4, d4. They've had a bit of a theoretical discussion with mixed results. But for this game Karjakin decides to go for the main move c3. Now black has a choice between d5, the marshal, my favorite, and the quieter move d6, which is what Peter Svidler goes for in this game. He's, transposing to the classical Ruy Lopez. Quite often this position is reached by starting with d6 instead of castles. White goes a3, so far so good. Both sides have tons of experience here. Svidler in this tournament has already used the move bishop b7, won a nice game against Anish Giri, but probably wasn't too happy with the results of the opening in that one. Therefore today he goes for his other main line, the Briar, the move knight to b8. This move might look shocking at first sight, but it's a well-established main line. This knight wants to go to d7, clear this diagonal for the bishop to go to b7 and keep an eye on the e4 pawn. All of this very well known. Knight b8, d4, knight bd7, knight bd2, bishop b7, bishop c2, rook to e8, and the move a4. The other main line here is the move knight to f1, the classical Spanish knight maneuver, knight f1, knight g3. When, thousands or tens of thousands of games have been played in this line, a4, c5 and so on. But Karjakin prefers a different approach, which he's already played in the past as well, so no surprise here. Goes for the move a4, sort of targeting the b5 pawn. And black goes for his standard move with bishop f8, and now we see the point of white's play delaying knight to f1. He goes bishop to d3. Now he's really attacking the pawn on b5, and that more or less forces black to play the move c6, which is a move you're not too happy to play because it blocks his own bishop on b7, which is a sad necessity. Still, this is a well-established line. White has tried many moves here. Knight f1 has been played now that the bishop no longer attacks the e4 pawn, regrouping this knight to g3. White has also tried all kinds of pawn moves on the queen side, b3 or b4, to develop his bishop to b2 and then see what happens. But the move Karjakin played is the most critical, or considered the most critical nowadays, queen to c2. Just a half-waiting move, improving his position a bit, defending the e4 pawn. And then he wants to see, depending on white's reaction, if he goes b3 or b4 and bishop b2, or if he falls back on this knight f1, knight g3 plan, depending on black's reaction, Svidler goes rook c8. After some thought, nothing new here. All of this is still following a game by Sergei Karjakin against Magnus Carlsen, and Karjakin does not mind repeating that game where he got a good position against the world champion. After the move, he didn't play b4. Actually, this is the point I wanted to make. If you go b4 here, then black goes knight b6, and after a takes b, in this position black should play c takes b5. And we see one reason why this rook is on c8. It's targeting the pawn on c3, it's on the same file as the white queen. So here the c takes b5 is quite pleasant for black. That's why white starts with the move a takes b5 in this position, where he has not moved his b pawn yet. If black goes c takes b5 here with the same idea, then white switches plans, goes for the move d5, grabs space in the center, and blocks his bishop on b7, which doesn't have such a bright future now. So this position is not one that black does want to play normally, and therefore Svidler goes a takes b5, and now that the tension is clarified there, white does play b4, intending to continue developing with bishop b2 and then looking for a pawn break in the center with c4, where the white pieces are a little more active. Now the plan is to go knight b3 and knight to a5. This position is considered to be a little unpleasant for black, but Svidler did not come empty-handed. Previously, black had gone for slow maneuvering here, moves like queen c7, followed by rook a8, then g6, bishop g7. But they did struggle a little bit, as Magnus Carlsen did in that game against Sergei Karjakin, where he played queen c7. But Svidler has a novelty up his sleeve. He plays a move c5, which dramatically changes the situation. All of a sudden there's pawn tension everywhere, and the play switches from slow positional maneuvering to direct calculating. And it's one of these moves which you can only play if you've checked it carefully with a computer, so some homework here by Peter Svidler. First white move is clear, b takes c5, eliminates the threat of cb4 and cd4, and waits for black's reaction. The most natural seems to be d takes c5, but then white has a rather pleasant choice. He could go d5, or I guess this is what bothered Svidler more, the move bishop takes b5, c takes d, and bishop to c4, activating this bishop on this diagonal. And this position does look a little unpleasant for black. Therefore, Svidler's idea was a different one. He keeps making things messier by playing e takes d4 now. When, tension keeps mounting, white has a couple of plausible moves. C takes d4 runs into d takes c5, when going d5 might look tempting, but here the black passed pawns are very strong after c4, so you don't want to do that. Going e5 once again looks good, but runs into c4, asking this bishop where it's planning to go. The bishop goes to f5, hoping that this knight moves so it can snack the pawn on h7. Black throws in g6, and after e takes f6, let's say takes here, g takes f5, black is doing all right. So a lot of homework had to be done in order to make this playable, because c takes d4 is not the only move. In fact, it's not the move played in the game. c6 was played in the game. But to explain c6, let's first look at the move knight takes d4, which looks very reasonable as well, attacking the pawn on b5. And after knight takes c5, bishop b5, white would just be a pawn to the good. In this position, black has the very sneaky resource b4, which once again, you do need a computer to point that one out. C takes b4, d takes c5, and the tactics work in black's favor. B takes c5, bishop takes c5. Once again, we see this rook coming in very handy on the c8 square. This knight can't go away because of bishop takes f2, and the white position just collapses here. For example, queen b2 looks logical, but then black goes knight to e5, attacking the bishop on d3 and the knight on d4, with the winning position for black. Therefore, these things aren't so simple after b4, and in fact the best move here would be the move c6, which Karjakin decides to play immediately. He decides to switch the move all around, go c6, and now black could transpose to the line we just saw with bishop takes c6, knight takes d4, b4, which leads to a very complicated position. White has a couple options. Bishop a6 is a computer's choice, c4 is another move, c takes b4 is also possible, and black could take on e4, or go bishop b5. With very complicated play in either case, but Svidler only needing a draw. After c6 he had a longer think, was surprised by c6, he probably prepared for c takes d and knight takes d4, and he saw a line that eliminated a lot of material and pushed the game closer to equality, but not quite, as we shall see. He goes for d takes c3, forcing white to take on b7, and now c takes d2. This sequence looks confusing. bc8, then black is in time to take on e1 with check and take back here when he would be fine. So white has nothing better than going queen takes d2. Now black, of course, has to deal with his pawn on b7, has to play rook to b8, and bishop takes b5. The moment white is a pawn up, but of course black can take on b7 here. This was Svidler's original intention, but over the board he had second thoughts. After rook takes b7, bishop to c6, rook b6. The move he had missed when calculating from far away is rook to a8, which is not the end of the world, but it does lead to a slightly unpleasant situation for black. His active rook on e8 gets exchanged. Now white manages to maintain his bishop, let's say bishop a4, and white is a bit better. It's, yeah, position, we're gonna see something similar later in the game. It's not devastatingly bad, but it is a little unpleasant. White has the two bishops, this pawn d6 could be a little weak, so it's by no means a forced draw. Svidler tried to be more cunning, went for the move queen b6, intending to take on b7, but with the queen activating it and attacking this e4 pawn. Here Karjakin should have turned the move, switched the move, or to go bishop d3, queen b7, rook b1, which leads to the position in the game. But once again, he starts with the second move of the line, just when he went c6 instead of knight takes d4. And this allows black an extra option, the move rook takes e4 here, which looks a little insane, keeping this pawn on the board. But the tactics seem to work out. And for example, after bishop d3, rook e1, queen to c7, black seems to be doing all right. But Svidler passed up that chance with rook takes e4 and went for the more human move, queen takes b7, getting rid of this far advanced pawn. Now bishop d3 has to be played to defend this pawn and attack the black queen. Queen to a8, rook takes b8, rook takes b8, when the position is sort of stabilized. And we see a similar picture to the one we've seen earlier. White has the two bishops, which is a bit of an advantage. The d6 pawn could be a little weak. And again, black is very solid. There's only a little material left, so it shouldn't be too serious, but clearly black has to defend here in order to survive. White goes bishop bishop b2, completes his development and introduces some ideas with e5, or maybe even with bishop takes f6. Here, Svidler once again had a choice. He could try to force the situation with d5, trying to get rid of his weakness immediately. But white has two options, both of those might lead to a small edge. One is e5, the other is just to go e takes d5. And Svidler decided to go for another move, which looks very, very natural as well, the move queen to a2, attacking this bishop. Now, if white had to go bishop somewhere, let's say bishop d4, black exchanges queens. And without the queens, white doesn't have that much attacking potential. Material is very reduced, and even though white would still be a bit better on paper with his two bishops and his slightly better pawn structure, this position should end in a draw, and that's what Svidler was counting on. But instead, Karjakin played a stronger move, the move rook to e2, defending this bishop and keeping the queens on the board. Once again, black has to work. Knight c5 is a move you don't really want to play, because then your structure gets ruined with bishop takes f6. So Svidler decided to play the move h6, a move I'm not so sure about. It's a decent practical choice, I believe, because it just eliminates all kinds of knight g5s in many lines. At first I thought that black should try to force the issue with d5, but then white has some slightly unpleasant continuations. One of them is e takes d once again. Svidler was also concerned about the immediate knight g5. It's also lines with e5, knight e4, bishop takes, pawn takes, and knight g5. None of these do look too strong for white, but it is a lot to worry about over the board, and therefore Svidler decided to play the move h6 just to eliminate this white knight jump, but it also means that he gives white a free move, which white can use to improve his position. And that's what Karjakin does. He goes queen to c1, threatening bishop takes f6, chasing the black queen away. Queen to b3, bishop to c4, and queen to b7, keeping an eye on the e4 pawn, which is now under attack. Once again, Svidler was counting that white would be forced to simplify here with, let's say, e5, d takes e, knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, when after queen to b1, exchanging the queens, there's just not enough material left on the board for white to have any serious winning chances. Karjakin found another resource to keep the game going. He went for the move queen to d1, cute little move, stopping knight takes e4 because of bishop to d5, picking up this piece. And black is back to square one, has to defend a slightly worse position. He goes for the move rook to e8, keeping an eye on the e4 pawn, attacking it once again. And now there is a choice between e5, which would be better than in the line we just saw, because after all the exchanges, black does not have the option queen b1, getting rid of the queens. And with queens on the board, you have to be a bit careful here. Position should be drawish, or at the very least defensible. I always mix up defensible and defendable. Let's say defensible. But there is some pressure. This bishop is very strong, and black would have to suffer. And Karjakin finds another way, which also leads to some pressure. At first sight, a surprising decision. He gives up one of his bishops, goes bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, and now we see his point. Now he goes e5, forcing black to take, d takes e5, knight takes e5, targeting this very weak f7 pawn. Black only has one move to avoid the loss of that pawn. Let's move rook e7, but we can see it's a little clumsy. The black pieces don't coordinate very well, and with limited time, Karjakin had like half an hour here and Svidler had a couple minutes. This position is not so much fun for black to defend. Still, white has to do something. Karjakin went for the move queen to d4, nice centralization. There's a drawback that gives up control of the back rank, and in some lines queen b1 check could be unpleasant. Therefore, another move that was suggested later is the move g3, just maintaining the status quo. And if black tries to free himself here by going knight d7, then there's the very unpleasant bishop d5, when all kinds of tactics start popping up. For example, queen c7 looks natural, but now white wins by taking on f7, queen d5 check, king g6. Let's just continue the line. Queen e4 check. The black king is forced into the open because after king f7, queen e6 is actually checkmate. So black has to be very careful. Probably should not go knight d7 here, but the position would remain a little unpleasant. Said Karjakin went queen d4. Pretty much similar story, but now this knight d7 move, which Svidler played, works a little bit better because, first of all, in many lines there is the resource queen b1 check, and secondly, knight takes f7 is less scary here. It was played though, because it's pretty much the only winning chance and white doesn't risk anything. Even if he doesn't get an attack and everything is exchanged on f7, the position with the rook and the queen and the three pawns against two minor pieces and two pawns, white can never be worse. If black defends, he can't be better either, so it should lead to a draw, but it's a decent practical try to at least pose some problems. Rook takes f7 is forced. Karjakin throws in rook b2. If he took on f7 immediately here, now black isn't time to defend. King takes, let's say queen c4 check, king g6, and this time around there's no queen e4 check, which was lethal in the other line, and after queen e6 is knight f6. So this doesn't lead anywhere for white, and would lead to the aforementioned drawish position. That's why Karjakin tries rook to b2 to chase this queen away from covering all these important squares, but Svidler does not want to give up control of those squares, goes queen c6. Queen c7 was also possible, in case you're wondering why he didn't start with rook to b2, then queen c7 would have been played. And it's also right, but here Svidler goes queen to c6, and once again, bishop takes f7, king takes f7, doesn't really lead anywhere. So Karjakin had to come up with a different way to try to keep the pressure going. Or, well, if there is a different way, he didn't have to win this game as mentioned, because with the draw the match continues. But let's switch into video of the game and see what happens. Is this the video? Here we go. Not sure you can see all that much. That we got Sergei Karjakin thinking, and he's going for the move rook to b5. Trying to activate his rook. But the attentive viewer might have noticed the computer evaluation drops dramatically after rook b5. And I'll give you a couple of seconds to figure out why this move is actually a blunder. And I wasn't sure that Svidler would find the punishment. It's not that obvious, especially in time travel when you've been defending and can't really hope for more than a draw. So let's see how Peter Svidler reacts. There was a bit of a spoiler. If you played close attention, there's Svidler scratching his head, and he moves his king to the corner. Let's see if we can get a close-up of the board, and we've seen Karjakin very slightly shook his head after king h8. That's the move he's missed. And it turns out that white just blundered a piece. Bishop takes f7 now is no longer, well, it's possible, but you drop the rook on b5 and you're just a piece down. Bishop e8 doesn't help because there's queen b1 check, breaking the pin. So, a tragic blunder by Sergei Karjakin after king h8. Yeah, he is a piece down. He could have and should have tried to fight on with something like this, queen d5. If black exchanges queens, white actually might have some decent chances to build a fortress here. I'm not so sure this is winning. Because yeah, with opposite color bishops and only one weakness after g3, king g2, there's fair drawing chances, but keeping the queens on the board should get the job done for black. Let's say bishop to c5 here, but there would still have been work to do. Instead, Karjakin, obviously punch drunk from missing king h8, went for the move rook d5. Last trick, he's hoping for knight f6, rook to d8, when he would win his material back because this rook can't move since it has to defend the bishop on f8. But no such luck. Svidler went knight b6, a double attack against these two guys, and now white is not going to be a piece down, but actually a whole rook, because more material is dropping. And therefore, Sergei Karjakin resigned here. Tragic end of the game for Sergei Karjakin, who had been pressing the whole game. Svidler actually played a good game, I think. He came up with a good novelty, the move. Where is it? The move c5. And then did defend pretty well, so I do think that he earned his draw here, but as he said himself, he couldn't even think of winning the game, and rook b5 was a bit of a gift, probably due to the fatigue of playing this World Cup for I don't know how many days, 25 days in a row. Still, Peter Svidler up to 0 in the World Cup final. This is not the end of the match. There are 2 more games to be played. And tomorrow with the white pieces, Peter Svidler will have the chance to clinch the title should he earn a draw there. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next video. And check out Peter Svidler's video series on chess24.com if you want to learn more about the Ruy Lopez. Bye bye.